Recording, and so hello again, good morning everybody. This is SIG API Machinery bi-weekly meeting. Today is September the 25th of 2019. We don't have a super packed agenda, but thanks to Jordan, we have a number of items to discuss, and probably that will expand a bit further than what his prediction is, but we will see. I was hoping that we could get some people from etcd. I think they are coming a bit late, but we can start if you guys are ready. Jordan, do you want to go?
Sure. So a contributor opened a pull request that is linked there, 82580, which is wanting to add the ability to specify an alternate prefix when pointing specific resources at alternate etcd servers. We already have this ability when we're configuring how we store stuff in the primary etcd server, and this is adding that same capability to the overridden servers. The shape of the poll looks okay. The syntax on the overridden servers flag is pretty hokey anyway, so it's deterministic. It's ugly but livable. The question I wanted to raise here was, is this, like, what are the use cases that back this, and do we want to do things to encourage people sharing an etcd cluster, etcd server between clusters, or is just simple parity with the existing primary cluster sufficient to add this? So I wanted to get people's thoughts on this and get more eyes on this proposal.
Yeah, I'm kind of two minds about this. I can see arguments both ways. David, do you have a strong feeling?
I don't. I wouldn't personally share etcds. The only reason I would be more sympathetic to it is because I can see myself in a future saying, I really want to be able to specify not the prefix, but the actual storage location for a custom resource definition. And if I want to do that to support some kind of migration case, maybe this guy has a similar need.
Yeah, no, I glanced through the bug, and it looks like they want to share a etcd specifically for events among many clusters, on which at first I was like, that seems like not a very good idea, because that's like
take all our fires and we put them in one dumpster.
Yeah.
You can see querying power there. That's actually kind of a cool idea.
They claim that the events are bursty, so like if you put enough clusters on the same thing, like they won't all create a ton of events all at the same time. I guess maybe that would work out in some environments. So maybe it makes sense. The thing I'm more likely to want, like personally, in the next 6 months to a year is, like, I suspect we're going to have to do something to help folks migrate built-in APIs to CRDs and or vice versa, and or move CRDs between groups. So, but that's affects the etcd path, but not necessarily the prefix, I guess.
Okay.
I don't think that helps or hurts.
Yeah, I think it's only vaguely related to this. In the like con category is our user interface is already super unfriendly, and this makes it worse.
Well, okay, but figure his alternative is us telling him, go ahead and set up a gRPC proxy or a etcd proxy, whatever it's called, and do it yourself. And so I think we should concretely suggest that to him if we turn this down. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of partial to, like, okay, we do it for the regular one. It probably makes sense to permit it for the override ones too, I guess.
How far do we want to go? So we have other etcd options like client credentials. I don't know, I haven't looked in a while. Do we intend to provide overrides for every etcd option we have.
I thought you could already specify the credentials separately for the
Nope.
etcds. Is
We
that
have
not?
a single set of credentials that are used for all etcd connections, primary and overridden.
I've got to say, like, that doesn't seem great, especially in this scenario. Like,
Can you imagine configuring that?
that seems like a bad security practice to like have all of your etcds, including the shared one among all your clusters, have the same credentials.
Yeah, and sharing is forcing all of them
Yeah.
to use the same one, which is bad.
Yeah, so I guess if somebody sent me a change to split that out, as long as it doesn't break existing stuff, it'd be hard for me to argue against that. As much as I hate adding knobs to our API. We could, so one thing we could request maybe is, this is kind of a ridiculous thing to configure in a flag, so maybe it's time to ask for a file-based.
I think one of the comments was, today the flag is mapping a resource to a set of server URLs.
Yeah.
And this is sort of glomming on a prefix into that structure as well. And if we think credentials are also a thing that you would want to...
Clearly you can't stuff credentials into that flag. Maybe...
Oh, watch me.
Maybe, well, you're eventually you run out of command line length.
It wasn't a challenge, Jordan.
Okay.
I think maybe leave the existing flag how it is and add a YAML file or something that's like breaks out options by URL or something like that.
Okay, so we're not opposed in principle. We would recommend being cautious about sharing etcds between clusters, and rather than making the flag more insane, go in a direction of structuring the etcd overrides.
Yeah, time to add a config file, I think. Like leave the existing flag and add a optional file providing more each.
Do we want a standalone file, or is this the first portion of an API server config file with an etcd stanza?
We already have a bunch of different config files, right?
Yeah, is that good or bad?
I think it's bad, but is this really the best time to like make the one config file to rule them all?
If we don't do it on this one, we won't do it on the next one, and we'll never end up doing it.
Yeah, I support the validity of that reasoning, but we're already in this condition and surviving. Also, if the contributor adds a completely optional file, then that has no impact on my life. But if we add a overarching config file to include everything, that has a large impact on my life. So I have selfish reasons for being like, let's just continue the existing pattern. Also, it'll be a bad experience for the contributor to be told like, actually, you have to like regularize our entire config to like add this thing. Like, I think they're.
It wouldn't require that if we did decide that this would be like a separate storage stanza. He could start the file with just the configuration.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you think we can agree super quickly on how the file should work?
Well, Jordan and I have made one before. I think we were both unhappy.
There's a recommendation.
So I was unhappy enough to remove the options I put into it over a 5-year period. You know, I think we actually may have a shot at specifying this section.
This is legitimately something that has to go into a config file. It cannot go into a dynamic API because we need to know where etcd is in order to read anything out of the API. So there is that.
Well, you only need to know where one etcd is if we're being serious about it.
Yeah, am uncomfortable with making that, like the whole point of doing this is that etcd is not a single point of failure for all of your resources, right? So it seems a little backwards to like make one etcd.
Also, the ICD config is fixed, better to be fixed at the cluster creation or startup time.
Well, like, so as a concrete thing, Daniel, you could have something where you have your initial etcd that you do have connection to that holds, say, pods, services, namespaces, and then references one for events.
Oh yeah, we could do fun things like have.
Because I could see myself wanting to have a concept of an etcd server for, say, my aggregated API servers.
Yeah, so like if you go down one more step along that path, you have something like the API service object or the CRD object specifies like a more complete etcd path, and then you're back to the thing that I was saying earlier, which is like you can use this feature to migrate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but do we want to go all the way? Like, it seems like it seems like we can go all the way down that road and make this into a enormous production, or we can let this poor contributor add a simple config file with just the thing they want to do. I'm kind of inclined to do that, but
okay.
I don't have a super strong opinion.
I'm okay with that. Just as we create our config file eventually, we are going to be asked to provide a way forward for every other config file that we add.
I think thinking about the structure of the etcd config in a way that could be a file just scoped to the etcd pieces, or could be a stanza in an overall config, is probably a reasonable way to approach it.
Yeah, I'm okay with those things. I think my only thought here is we should try and keep our overhead appropriate to the thing this contributor is trying to do. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right, I'll take that back to the PR.
Thank you. Thanks for raising it. The next one is client go context threading. I did not read any of these. Jordan, you want to talk about them?
Well, I will talk about them. So a year and a half ago, apparently, we all talked and decided that this was something that we should do, and that we were okay changing the signature of client methods to thread context to requests, and talked about it on the mailing list. I don't think it made it out to Kubernetes dev, but maybe I'm wrong. And then a proposal got opened back when we opened proposals against the community repo, and a couple PRs got opened and languished, and nothing much happened. Then, like 3 to 6 months ago, we started plumbing context to more places to make some of our internal handling of webhooks and admission work better. Recently, we plumbed context to the aggregator so that it can cancel calls to the backend, and a poll just merged today that makes our authentication and authorization webhook calls honor context timeouts. And so there's been more attention on this recently, and I would like to see the client support context plumbing move forward. I think we still agree that we want context and timeout and cancel support. The main question I have is whether we are still happy with breaking client Go signatures on a release boundary, or if we want to generate peer methods, deprecate the old methods, and then after 1 to 2 releases, remove the old methods. The reason I can see in favor of that is that it eases upgrade. So you can bump library versions without changing all of your client calls, and then over a period of time, migrate all your client calls. And then before you bump to the next level of the libraries, you have to have completed that migration. The downside is that it makes our client method names ugly. We're left with create with context type method names.
Given that we should be able to provide like, I don't know, maybe even a Go format rewrite rule to fix all your implications of this.
I was going to propose we do something different, actually. And Jordan and I talked a little bit about this yesterday, which is I think we should go back and generate new clients with better packages and names and look if there's any other small things that we would fix. Generate new clients, get rid of the global pull all 700 groups together client in the new, and then just have people switch over several releases. Because the bulk of this stuff is the same. The thing that we're talking about is plumbing through context. And there are some ugly things that we might want to actually address adding new methods I don't like straight up, because that impacts everyone who has extensions. It means those methods are there forever. I don't see a lot of benefit just to that. I would say I am much more in favor of doing some small things to improve usability of the client, add a new package.
I'm probably fine with that. It's just, are people actually going to do it? Like, you might as well fix the thing that we've been saying for a long time, which is basically split our library into two, right? Like have the Go base and then the generated stuff.
I mean, you're basically talking about whether you hit someone in the face when they update Cube or you give them the chance to spread it out.
So
I mean, both of those are going to happen no matter what.
If we were going to completely rethink the client library, I think we would be well served to try to snip a lot of the dependencies that we have on API machinery today.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't necessarily proposing rewriting the client. But I could see how that's a fourth option as well.
Well, if we're going to create client 2, we should create a client 2 that we like, right? Like, I want to be able to set timeouts on individual requests because Clayton made an API server endpoint that takes 2 minutes to return.
It also requires you to do an extension method, yeah. And like, there's a bunch of other things with REST. So like, I guess the question is context more important than us going and cleaning everything up? In which case, create context, as ugly as it is fine. I was thinking more of do you break everyone in one release versus giving a way to control over several?
Let me ask you this. Have we not broken clients over a release boundary ever?
Signatures of the client Go clients have not changed very much.
Get options, list options, those are
it's changed a couple times, but most releases, if you just construct from a kubeconfig, get a client set, and then call those methods, you can upgrade without much difficulty at all, or any changes.
When does get options? 1.9, 1.10?
I'm not super interested in something that means that we maintain 2 clients for the foreseeable future.
I mean, if you break everybody in one release, that means for someone to pick up new fields, they have to refactor their whole code base. That's the part of it that I felt was where I could feel some empathy for the community that still needs to change these things, because context is the right thing to do for long-running stuff, and some of these do.
I have an ugly suggestion. What if we wrap a very thin wrapper library, which looks like the current fix the API to use context, with context stuff, have a wrapper library that has the old signatures and then just maps them to the new library that just uses context to do.
Like we did for the dynamic client when I made it?
Yeah.
Did we ever remove the old?
The old dynamic client is gone. There's actually no consumers of dynamic client inside of KK right now.
I'm just saying, I mean, if you did that, then you don't end up with the with context methods, and there is a cheap, easy way of doing the migration. You just end up
into generators, right?
Another thought, if we build client 2 anyway, why do we care about ugliness for the old one?
Client 2, as much as so I guess the question is who here is going to stand up and commit to client 2 in a 6-month to 9-month time frame? And is client 2 inextricably linked to context, or is context just something we should have done a long time ago because we've hit it? I mean, another thing, David, is like and timeout's a great point, is you have a context, you don't need timeout. That's what context does. So there is an element of that.
Oh. Okay, I chose a particular one. Like, I want to impersonate on this request.
Yeah, I know.
I want to be scope limited on this request, or set an arbitrary header on this request. Like, there are things that I would do differently because I've hit pain.
Context timeout cancellation feels more fundamental than those. I think it's not great to make the shape of the new thing that supports cancellation and timeout be so different that it is difficult for people to adopt it.
I don't think that to do those things, it would have to be difficult, right? The idea of a modifier function is sort of well explored in Go and additive.
It's not going to work for a lot of call sites, though. There's a lot of places where you don't pass in a modifier. So we're basically saying we'll make some people's lives easier, but they could just ignore it. But those people's lives were already easy. I mean, if we think that everybody, like, do we want to support 2 long-term? We kind of say no. Do we want to put context in? We're kind of saying yes. How do we do that in a way that's minimally invasive to the community, where even the people who are using just the interfaces, probably who want the interfaces, still need to be able to switch, right? If you're passing a namespace getter, for instance, you're not going to have the with context method, unless I guess we add that to all those, which I'd prefer not to.
It's also worth noting that adding context to the existing generated clients and generating completely different looking clients, V2 clients, whatever we want to call them, those are not mutually exclusive. We can do both of those.
Here's how I'm feeling. Like, as a user of the client libraries, I think if I probably would prefer that they actually did include context, and I would rather write my script or find and replace to add my existing context or whatever, or context.todo to every call site, than I need to switch every call site to be like a and do that, right?
Oh, and also to the wrapper, the problem with the wrapper is, like, there's lots of bugs that exist in big code bases because people added context to structs. Like, context is the first parameter for a reason, and you mess with that at your peril. So, like, I think the wrapper, as appealing as it might be for a workaround, just creates more bugs down the road. Is this a pull the Band-Aid off kind of problem, which is, we're sorry, here's a find and replace, here's a Go refactor that adds context to do at the beginning of every one of these methods.
Yeah, I think that's my preference. I don't think I would say this for very many changes, but context is, I think, meeting my bar for it's worth the disruption.
I can understand. I was just afraid of the people with pitchforks, because the people with pitchforks are particularly loud and vocal recently, and it was more of a, we know that we'll break it. Can we do a really good job of communicating this up front? And maybe 117 is too aggressive, but we would say, give people a release to get used to the idea, and say in 118, this is coming.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I'd like it sooner. Like, we can make noise of the mailing list.
Is 117 too aggressive?
Yeah, it doesn't seem too aggressive if we can get the changes in. I don't know.
What would someone do
differently? Yeah.
If they found out about it now and then had to react in 3 months or whenever they upgrade to 117, versus if they find out about it now and then have to react in 6 months? Like,
yeah,
that's fair.
I think the key for making it successful is just to figure out who the people with the pitchforks are and show them in advance, like, hey, if you're mad, maybe you should pitchfork me right now, right?
I would be, well, we can talk about how we message
incompatibility.
that.
So the immediate incompatibility of the interface by changing the existing signature versus adding the peer method. That is the biggest thing you're going to get feedback on.
It's going to touch almost every line of every controller, every operator, every extension written in Go across the entire ecosystem. And then now the nice thing
for good reason, every place that doesn't pass a context is a DOS waiting to happen, right? Like it's
sure.
I have very painful and present personal experience with this that is making me inclined to say it is absolutely worth it.
Right, but this will probably be the most impactful client. Like we will create an enormous amount of work for an enormous amount of people in our ecosystem. And I think that's just like the listing out what we are doing is we are literally telling every single person who's invested in Cube, here's an hour or two's worth of work across thousands of people. And so I don't think I don't disagree that it's important. It's just like the backlash is going to be from a few vocal people, and we're going to make a lot of people's lives a little bit worse.
And when you have things that are generated or things that you have dependencies, it's not always, write a script and do a find and replace and it takes you an hour. It's go open issues and pull requests for your 8 dependencies to ask them to upgrade to 117 libraries and regenerate and then revendor and then, that's the real impact of
that's true.
To be clear, the peer methods don't help in that case because your existing dependencies aren't fulfilling those.
Yeah, neither do wrappers.
So
the only thing that helps is like a new library version from which you can construct a interface of the old library version.
Right, and that gets into like option number 3, which is a radical change, a big rethink, something that is much more expensive to switch to.
Okay, well, there's an intermediate option, which is like, this is, suppose we make a V2 and this is the only thing we do. And like we take all of our much needed improvements for the future and be like, okay, once we have practice making a V2, we can make a V3 that fixes all that stuff. But I don't know, how do people feel about that? Like make it V2 and this is the only change we do. Which is really how the client Go is supposed to work anyway.
Yeah, certainly. The things I was thinking about were things like slightly cleaner package names and breaking up the mega package. That no matter, like, the thing about the mega package is it pulls in every API group. So there's no, like, most people who are pulling in client Go Kubernetes get every API group, every so forth. There is an opportunity to at least cut that octopus touching every bit of code that we ship in our APIs. And then there's a couple of smaller things, like we could change the signatures in a few places, but I'm not even sure that signatures on new is really.
I agree. All those are wonderful things. Are you signing up for them?
I would probably, like, just thinking about the ecosystem pain, and like I was struggling when talking with Jordan with this yesterday, is like, I know this is one of those cases where we're going to cause enough work to everybody else in the world that maybe taking on a tiny bit of work, and that was kind of like the big client rethink versus a smaller one in my head. Was the smaller client rethink is like, we just go change the generator to generate 2 different packages at 2 different locations with an if block. And that's the only change we do, maybe, or a very small change. Is that enough to, and then we say, like, over 2 releases, we will stop updating this in 117. You can switch in 117, or we'll stop updating in like 118. You can switch in 117. Maybe we take feedback on, are there anything we can do to make it the transition?
Honestly, if everything is generated and we just we add a new set of generators, like, why, given the arguments you just made, why not maintain the existing one, adding new fields for, like, I don't know, a year?
Sure. Right? More than one release. Yeah. I don't know how quickly the Band-Aid should be pulled off. There's equal argument that not pulling the Band-Aid off is something we have struggled with historically on a few things.
I mean, I kind of feel like all the places that need to be updated are actually bugs. So it's okay to ask people to update that, but I do take the point that it's like especially painful to update this if you have a bunch of dependencies that haven't yet. So for that reason, maybe it is reasonable for us to add a v2 that only fixes this. We can fix the other things if it's like, but that doesn't seem nearly as important to me as the context thing.
Well, the other thing is if you go to v2, then you don't have to change the world, right? You can change it package by package.
Well, if you fix the generator, you change all of them.
Well, no, I would say if you have a v1 and a v2.
Oh, you mean using it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Using it, especially if the v2 package gives you a like, here's the method you call to get a v1 client set. Then that makes it easy to interact with dependencies that haven't updated yet.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you at some point deprecate the v1?
Or you probably deprecate right off the bat. As soon as you do this, you deprecate v1, but you know the actual rolling it out can be done piecemeal rather than it being a
But basically what I'm saying is if you add a parallel set of packages or whatever, however you choose to do that, if you add one and just leave the existing generators alone, it's fairly cheap for us to maintain too. And yeah, eventually it doesn't make sense to maintain two for like the next decade, but for the next year, which is our deprecation period for APIs, maybe it makes sense.
To give people more time to be able to migrate to the newer version, versus 1 or 2 versions.
Yeah, we can even make the interface go both ways. Like the v1 package could offer to give you a v2. Wait, that makes a circular. Does that make a circular?
Yeah, extensions are the problematic. Like anybody who has extensions would have to duplicate those, and those might. I don't know that you can. Well, I guess you can generate them. Maybe it's a little ugly.
We can think about that. Okay. Have we reached a conclusion? I guess the conclusion is it's worth effort on our part to maintain 2 clients to avoid the crowds with pitchforks.
I mean, we could propose it, and then the moment the pitchforks come out, we'd be like, haha, we're just kidding, April Fools. But I don't know that, like, I'm trying to think of an older example in the last couple of years that we've hit. The closest one I can think of is the Go mod stuff. And we're able to deflect a lot of that on the Go team.
I mean, the get options, and there were a couple of changes to the signatures of clients, but I don't know if we have the same degree of dependencies, multiple levels, Steve.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you maintain 2 versions, then whenever you make a change, you need to make that change into the 2.
Yeah, but we.
And then 2.
Well,
there are a couple of ways around that.
What we're saying sort of is that we're now going to start respecting the Semver rules, and we're not going to make breaking interface changes, period. So.
No, you don't have a bug. You found a bug in the existing v1.
So like
that bug needs to be.
Yeah, you need to fix it in both if the implementation is buggy. But the way Go is supposed to work, like I don't know how we would actually construct it, but the way you're supposed to do this in Go is like leave one package as an interface and like it imports the other one and calls it.
This is what I actually meant that having it as v1 as a wrapper is just that the v1 API just calls the v2 API with its parameters, just adding a context to do.
Yeah, that's one way to do it. That may be the best way to do it. I don't know. That means you can't start with a v2 and like get a v1 pointer because you have a circular import loop.
Yeah, it's sort of weird. v1 has to depend on v2, but
yeah, it's a little strange.
So related, and like I think this is kind of related, like on stability, is like this is the most user-facing of our interfaces since there are generated typed clients. We've certainly been a little bit. We generally try not to break public signatures, but we have changed public signatures in the past, and we haven't held ourselves against that. I personally don't buy the argument that not changing our signatures helps us across the board, but I'm willing to entertain that. We have certainly been discussing, there's a number of other cleanups in Client Go that need to happen that would change things that are likewise almost public, but have lower impact, usually on people who are either pretty deep in the guts or are doing clever and unusual things, which is a smaller set. So I think this one is the try to minimize the amount of pain caused to the maximum amount of people is a reasonably good rule of thumb, or at least show that we're doing it.
Do we know if any of the other clients support passing content? Python client?
It's really a Goism and a
Yeah.
C-ism and Java-ism. Actually, does Java have context, or is that inherent in the thread local?
What's the bad
Well,
example, John?
I mean, even if it did, I mean, there's how you encode and serialize and deserialize the context in the request, right? Which is very Go specific. So, I mean, if we want to do it in another language, my guess is we're going to actually have to build it in that language.
Yeah, Java doesn't have something quite as first class as context.
Okay. Yeah. Ultimately, this group I think is mostly responsible for client Go. We could recommend, but I don't think we have to do a ton for others. It's more of a language by language, at least. That's how we've historically held it.
No, that's fair, but I mean, I think if we were to do it in another language, we should just be aware. I mean, I think we'd want it to be compatible with the Go context, and then so we're going to have to build serializers, deserializers, and other things to make that work.
What kind of serializers?
Well, the context actually gets serialized in the request, right?
I don't
think so.
No. The context gets passed to the request and governs the request lifetime, and then a couple particular attributes like the timeout can get encoded as a parameter on the request, but the full contents of the context doesn't get serialized.
It would be our opportunity to be able to pass a relationship ID through, which would be cool, but we don't do it today.
Yeah, I mean, I know that the full context didn't get serialized, but I thought there were some things that did.
That's the only one I'm aware of.
I don't think so. And that would be a separate cap anyway, I think. So
yeah.
I think that current Go users, they are not afraid of getting broken by upgrade of the current Go. I think they are afraid of not knowing what is being broken, what is the breaking changes. Yeah. So as long as we are in the release note and we make it very clear what is broken, how to fix it.
I think they're afraid of both.
Honestly, how afraid they are, I think, depends on how much work you're forcing them to do. And I mean,
all right.
Well,
we're like 40 minutes into the meeting, and we've got 2 more items. So I think we should time box this item. Are we going to make a decision here, or is there a place that we can coordinate over a decision?
I will get the community pull request reopened against the enhancements pull request and summarize some of this discussion, and let's follow up there.
Okay, can you send us an email on the SIG list so we can all
pile
pontificate?
Yes, definitely.
All right, thank you. Awesome. Howie.
Yes, just FYI, one of the things that the extensibility working group plans to do next is we are exploring improvements we can make in CRD scalability. One of them is support binary encoding. So I would like to do some research and about CBOR and dynamic protobuf and have some proof of concept and measure it and send a proposal. We will loop in SIG scalability, I think, when we have a cap for it. And the other one is we cache the webhook conversion result for CRD conversion. This is more straightforward, but it might still need some design from some edge case.
Yeah. I'm interested in the binary encoding because if you add a new binary encoding for protobuf, you need to support it for all Kubernetes resources, not just CRD. Sorry, CRD, I misspoke. We can't just add a binary encoding that works only for CRDs. I don't think that makes very much sense as a API. Does David, do you agree with that?
I agree. I also have a significant interest in whether we can make something dynamic. I think that having some way to handle this dynamically instead of trying to force proto-C generation would be really nice as an improving thing when we try to talk across skewed servers from a client. It gives us, I think, some hope of generically doing the right thing in the future.
I'm kind of of two minds. It's kind of nice to like have protos that interact with all the tools, but on the other hand, it's even nicer to have a self-describing binary format that you don't have to like pre-compute in advance. That makes things so much easier.
I will say that I have not done the research on either of those things described there. I hadn't even heard of CBOR before.
Yeah, I understand it's something like a compressed JSON or binary JSON.
Yeah, it's in the family of like the binary JSONs, but it's got a full spec and it's pretty sane. But yeah, I think the idea here is just to do that investigation and help get like numbers so we can see how size and latency compare.
Okay, so you're just investigating.
This is the proposal here to do that investigation.
Yeah, if you come back and give us a document with a bunch of numbers like that, that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, sounds very nice.
Yeah. For apply, I don't know if Jenny's published it yet, but we're doing something similar to crunch that data down. So
yeah, we should coordinate with that work as well.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll be. We can talk about that.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be right here. But you're up next on CRD type improvements.
Yeah, just another couple announcements. So kept deadline. Quickly again. I was interested in a couple.
If someone's speaking, I can't hear them.
I think we were hearing everybody through Howie's mic. The room mic is really quiet.
Try now.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I can move too if that helps.
Yeah.
So just a couple of quick announcements. The caps for 117 are due on October 15th, which is actually coming up pretty quick. There was a couple of things I was interested in keeping track of around type improvements for CRDs. So immutability was one, and then the idea of adding refs to CRDs so that we can keep their size down and leverage other types. So those, I just wanted to mention that we're thinking about both of those here. With immutability, I wasn't totally clear on if we should try and make progress in 117 or if we should wait on server-side apply.
So I definitely want immutability and unions and some other things, and I feel like they should be implemented in the server-side apply schema code because we want it to work the same for all of the ways we offer our APIs. And I think that's kind of blocked on us getting apply rolled out everywhere. So yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to get Jenny and Anton like super focused on getting apply to the second beta.
I'm not sure this is really blocked on apply. It was blocked in 116 on having agreement on what equality is for native types, whether it's semantic reflection-based equality, what we have already in core, or something else. For CRDs, it's pretty clear that we have an agreement. So the CRD part, I think, is not blocked. We are pretty clear what to do.
Okay, but I want to make sure, even if we implement it differently in CRDs and their objects, which I'm not a super big fan of, but even if we do that, like we need to specify it the same. So there needs to be agreement on like how do you, like what's the X Kubernetes whatever tag.
Yeah, it's much more complicated because it's defined by the implementation of Go, right? So our marshalling defines what we get.
Yes.
So it sounds like the cap one agreement, we need to do a cap for everything.
Yeah. The ref in CRDs, I think that's
this is going to be multi-release.
Definitely what people want, but it is not easy.
I had concerns about this one. I think we talked about it last time as well.
I left kind of a brain dump at the end of this.
So Jordan, my concerns briefly, it would be things like you reference something that's not there. you reference something and it changes. Are you sure you really wanted that? And if something disappears and we're using it for validation and pruning, what do you actually do?
There's additionally, what if two things refer to each other?
Fun. I hadn't thought of that one.
Yeah.
Sorry, can you say that
so I
again?
think in general, the approach is when you refer to something, you're referring to a specific instantiation of that thing. And like we do something like include a hash so that if that thing changes, this is really hard because if the thing that you depend on changes, really that's also a new version of
you,
your CRD as well. And we need to we have all the code that does the conversion on the thing that changed, but we need to run the storage migrator or whatever. We need to propagate that change to all the places that refer to it, not just for built-ins, but also for CRDs that reference each other. Right? It's pretty complicated to make all that work.
and
I can see now that Jordan covered my list as well.
At least most of the things there. Feel free to add more if you think of them. This was just kind of off the top of my head. What?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that those are concerns so much as this is just an enumeration of the problems that this feature has to solve.
Right. I'm concerned, but
yeah, if the person implementing this or writing the KEP or whatever hasn't thought of this list of things, then there's probably going to be something wrong with the solution.
Yeah. So maybe a KEP to start with that enumerates the problems and starts to look at some of the prerequisites and the various milestones that we could do to make progress on this over a couple of releases.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Great. Okay, I think I know some people to talk to about this as follow-ups.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay. Is that our last item?
That's all I have.
All right. Yes. All right. I think I'm good unless anybody has something else to say. All right, let's call it a day. Everybody gets 10 minutes back.
Thank you, everybody. Nice talking to you. See you next time.
Thank you.